There's a very simple equation that I always think of. If you want to do something that is unique and original, that equals risky. If you take risk, that means sometimes you will fail. If you take the right to fail away from yourself or from others, they will not take risk. And if they don't take risk, they won't do unique and original.
Business casual.
There is a reason this topic keeps coming up on the show. Our data on the internet just is not safe. Hackers keep hacking, bad actors keep bad acting, and as a result, the cybersecurity industry is booming. By 2027, market research company Brand Essence projects that the global cybersecurity market will reach $403 billion. This growth is in large part due to the increasing number of cyber attacks happening each year. You may have heard about one of the latest ones, the teen hacker who recently breached both Uber and Rockstar Games. A cybersecurity company called Nora is revealing just how vulnerable we all are in our digital lives and trying to help us not be so stupid on the internet. Nora's founder and CEO, Hari Ravichandran, joined us on the podcast alongside media mogul Jeffrey Katzenberg, whose venture capital firm WndrCo backed Nora. For context, last fall, Nora raised $200 million at a $2.5 billion valuation. Jeffrey Katzenberg, the lauded Hollywood executive and co-founder of DreamWorks, is bullish on digital technology, even though he calls himself a digital idiot who has gotten hacked before. He's so bullish, in fact, that he would choose Silicon Valley over Hollywood if he had to start his career today. We touched on a lot of things outside of cybersecurity in this conversation, including what both Hari and Jeffrey seek in the entrepreneurs in which they invest. Hari started his firm Jump Ventures in 2017. They also offered some career lessons. And yes, we talked about Quibi, Jeffrey's attempt at a short-form streaming platform, which did not pan out how he had hoped. It's what he calls a crazy-ass moonshot. And with that, he offered some great advice on how to keep going in the face of failure. That's all next after the break. Financial education should be like oxygen, accessible to everyone. That's why Real Vision created an on-demand investing course that provides the tools and foundational knowledge you need to become a smarter and more confident investor. By the end of this comprehensive 10-hour course, you'll understand how the world's best investors think and execute trades. From there, you can tailor your learnings to your own personal circumstances. Business Casual listeners get a 15% discount off Real Vision's investing course, plus full access to their Plus membership tier with promo code BREW. Learn more at realvision.com/businesscasual. That's realvision.com/businesscasual. Jeffrey and Hari, welcome to Business Casual. I'm so excited to chat with you both.
Thank you, Nora.
Great to be here, Nora. Thanks.
Let's start with an icebreaker. This is for a segment called OG Occupations. I would love to know what each of your first jobs was, your OG occupation. So Hari, why don't you go first?
My first job was at a research center when I was in college, writing code for large parallel computers. So that was as an undergrad researcher.
Wow. So you've been in tech the whole time. That's amazing.
I have.
Jeffrey, what about you? Different story, I think.
My first job was back in the Jurassic era. I worked for John Lindsay, volunteered in his campaign when he ran for mayor, and once he was elected in 1966 in my teens, I actually got a job, and I was chief gopher. Go for it.
Go for it. I'm sure that taught you a lot.
I did. It was an amazing education, and spent the next 6 years working in different ways in city government, and sort of opened my eyes to the world in ways which, I could have never actually imagined.
Incredible. Well, this is not our first conversation on this podcast about cybersecurity, because it impacts literally all of us. And I know that experts tend to agree that humans are the weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity. And Jeffrey, you got hacked. I loved this thing that you did at South by Southwest. You
Not
got
sure
hacked.
that I love that you love it, but okay.
I know you didn't love it, but you got hacked by an ethical hacker.
Yes.
And told everyone about how it happened, how it went down. I was kind of shook because here I am thinking it takes a ton of sophistication to hack into your personal information, but your colleague got spoofed, his phone number, and the hacker, who was a woman, used a voice changing device to sound like him. So what surprised you the most about that experience when you got hacked?
Well, just as you say, I don't think any of us actually understand how vulnerable we all are. You think about over, say, the last, call it 5 to 10 years, all of us, I'm sure you and many of people in this audience today, we've all gone out and bought, Nest cameras and Ring doorbells and alarms and alerts and all of these things around our physical stuff, but around our digital, basically our phones, our laptops, we've actually done nothing. And our vulnerabilities through them are, infinitely greater. If I were so bold as to come to your home and rob you, think about what I would get. Some TV sets, maybe computers, a little bit of jewelry, no cash. But if I actually stole your, credit card, got into your mortgage, to your identity, your social security, any of those things, the damage that, can be done to all of us is literally by a magnitude greater. And I think that's the thing that for me really was a wake up, is to just see, how vulnerable we all have made ourselves and how little there is out there today to actually help us.
Mm-hmm. I love how confident you were going into it, because you said, I'm not that online, right? I feel like I protect myself on the internet. I'm not out there that much. But hacking, I think, is even more top of mind right now, because Hari, in recent news, a teen hacker breached both Uber and Rockstar Games. They tricked people by brute force. They tricked people versus doing it by brute force. And the person who had claimed responsibility for the hack said he was an IT person and convinced an employee at Uber to share their login credentials. How much of a threat is social engineering, and what does that mean exactly?
When hacking was getting going, and it was much more prevalent in the news and such. You had these script kiddies or people that were doing sort of brute force attacks, and a lot of times they were mostly just for pride. I mean, they would go brag to their friends and tell other people in the community that they got into this or got into that. What's really kind of transformed now over the years is it's very much a commercial enterprise at this point, where people have the ability to commercialize information that they're stealing. And so the point of entry, a lot of times, Nora, end up becoming really kind of vulnerable spots inside the system, and a lot of times that's human beings. And so social engineering has gotten a whole lot more sophisticated than it's ever been. The vectors of attack, the way that they can get in to your life, has certainly expanded. I mean, if you think about how many devices, how many services you use online, each of those ends up becoming a vulnerability point, and as a result, hackers kind of go where it's easy pickings. And in the case of both of the breaches that you're talking about, they were exactly that. They were social engineering attacks. A lot of time, even with Jeffrey, like the hack you were talking about, we sent him a spear phishing email. He clicked on it. His computer had not been updated. In that case, it was sort of a back-end thing. And with enterprises, they typically will do updates and patches pretty rapidly. But you can't prevent somebody from giving up their credentials. And once you have the credentials, it's relatively easy to kind of penetrate any kind of a system. Mm-hmm. So it's much more prevalent, much more sophisticated than it's ever been before.
And phishing emails, scam emails don't always look fishy, because it can come from an email address that looks just like someone who emails you every day, a colleague. Yeah,
again in that Jeffrey example, I think it looked like an email from Anthony Saleh from WndrCo, except it wasn't WndrCo.com, it was WndrCo.co, which cost, $8 to go register it. And it looked very similar,
Well, Jeffrey, I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing the story because it's a learning experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about it is that it's when you look at the circle of where it's not just your own device, but it's your immediate family. So it's your kids or your parents. Those are equally vulnerable access points in this, which is why, I think, Aura in particular, what the roadmap that Hari has set out for us, which is to actually create something that is sort of for the larger circle of your extended family. Because leaving any of them out on the ledge means you're all vulnerable.
I think most everyone is familiar with password managers now. You have to get one at most jobs these days, and we get emails and pitches for those all the time. But Hari, yours extends beyond that, your company Aura. There's identity theft prevention, there's things with credit scores. Can you just walk through what the suite of offerings is, without this being a sales pitch for Aura, but I guess how would you as a customer start to parse through all the offerings that Aura has and figure out, this is actually what I need?
I think our whole premise was to try to make it as easy for the customers as possible so you don't have to think about this stuff. So I think on the back end, what we ended up doing was integrating lots of different points of attack that customers have, whether it's your identity is getting breached, viruses, malware, phishing, even parental controls and kid monitoring and how your kids can be protected. Soon we have stuff coming out for seniors as well. So the way we think about it is bring all these things into one umbrella so the customer doesn't need to think about it, and keep on iterating as new hacks and spams and scams come out to keep them safe. And do it, this is kind of the important thing for us here, is do it in a way that it's proactive. So in a lot of cases, people wait till after the crime's been committed and then you have to go remediate the issue, and that's a lot of burden on a customer or a family. What we try to do is how do you prevent these things so you don't have to go through that headache on the back end.
You mentioned products for seniors. For those of us who grew up on the internet, we can still get tricked. So I'm curious, how do you create something different that is usable for seniors?
For seniors, phone still continues to be a huge vector of attack where there are just a lot of scam calls. And sometimes you think they're just scams, but really it's information gathering missions where they're trying to get information out of the seniors that can just be packaged up for some sort of an attack on the back end. So we're launching a call agent where we can look at sentiment analysis of the call that's coming in real time and help the senior determine if it's a scam or a phishing call. And if it is, it sends it off to a call agent on the back end. And the other big thing for seniors is delegation. Because in a lot of situations, if they're not, technically savvy, there may be a family member that they trust. So there's not really a lot of products in the market that allow a senior to delegate a certain level of authority to their kids or grandkids or somebody in their family that they know and trust to make sure that they're kind of keeping an eye out for a lot of their vulnerabilities. So those are a couple of the dimensions that we've been working hard on to be able to roll out in Q4 this year.
I want to get both your perspective on what it takes to get customers to care about cybersecurity. Hari, from the product standpoint, how do you get people to actually buy Aura before they've been hacked instead of being sort of reactive? And then Jeffrey, from your perspective as a customer, did it take you getting hacked to say, you know what, I actually do need this solution. I'm also going to invest in Aura. So Hari, starting with you.
Yeah, I would say it's you need a simple button. I mean, that's really the easiest way to say it, where the user looks at it and says, hey, I click the simple button and this is taken care of for me, where you don't have to think about it, curate the products, try to figure out what are the 18 things you need, is it up to date, am I fully secure? And so that's really what we try to do, is try to make things as easy and simple for customers as possible and have the system be a learning system. But even with that, you still have to educate the customer, because a lot of times people don't connect the dots. I mean, they see that, their information from even the ones you were talking about, like from Uber, if there was a breach and their information got out, you don't think twice about it, but that is going to come back in some way and affect you, whether it's around your credit, it's around your identity, or some other element of your life. So a lot of education and getting customers to understand that these events in isolation don't seem scary, but if you've been part of a couple of breaches, if you've had some of your privacy sort of compromised, etc., it could potentially come back in a very personal way that's heavy lift to be able to fix or remedy on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey, how about you?
Well, I just think, every day now, it's literally every day, all of us are becoming more and more aware of these breaches, of these phishing attacks that are going on, and that it's not just somebody else's problem. It's now becoming, your friends, the people next door, your relatives. Like, it's happening to every one of us. And so you look at the last, called 18 to 24 months, a lot of this on, sort of, again, something that's sort of been stirred up even more so out of, sort of post-COVID world. And so we are all actually becoming more and more aware of our vulnerabilities. And the opportunity of Aura is to, as Hari says, take something that's way too complicated for any of us to understand. I don't understand. I'm a digital idiot. I don't know, Hari rattled off 10 different things: malware, antivirus, VPN. Like, do I need any of those things? Do I need every one of those things? I want someone else to figure it out for me. And I want them to have a good housekeeping seal of approval that I know they are, best in class, that they actually deliver on the promise of what they say they're going to do. And that's what Aura set out to build and to deliver to the consumer. And so far is, just on a great track to do that. And it's a new need, and therefore it's a new product. And I think we've set a very high bar, a very high standard for the quality and reliability of what we're doing. Therefore, we're going a little slow as opposed to just leaping in. And I'm very proud of it. This is an opportunity where you can do good while doing good. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited for the new product launch, which is less than 60 days away. And for us to actually then be able to bring it direct to consumers.
Hari, do you tend to see a bump in customer interest when there is big news of a public breach like that of Uber?
Yeah, very much. Like, for example, the Equifax breach happened a couple of years ago, or anything that affects credit, your bank information, financials, or family safety. If there's a breach that sort of, is in that zone, people do kind of sit back and take attention at that point and see if anything's kind of gotten out. I think if it's sort of a more mundane, run-of-the-mill type of a breach, you don't see a whole lot. But the bigger ones that have financial or family impact tend to get a lot of attention.
I'm definitely feeling pretty nervous, so I think it's time for me to take control of my own cybersecurity after like the 5th conversation about it on this podcast. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're going to take a very quick break. More with Hari and Jeffrey when we come back. The future seems pretty cool, right? All of those amazing new inventions that are going to make life way better. Like, wouldn't it be great if your car could change color to match your mood or even match your outfit? Buick is thinking about the future every day. A future built around you. A future with super smart Buick electric vehicles that can make life even better, and soothing, spa-like interiors that can leave you feeling relaxed and refreshed. Learn more about how Buick is thinking about the future at buick.com/future. That's buick.com/future. So, Hari, we recently spoke with Corey Thomas. He's the CEO of Rapid7, which is a cybersecurity company that focuses on corporate clients. And we had a discussion about the hacker economy and how it's booming, it's robust. There's people who specialize and work together to hack into companies for millions and millions of dollars. As an engineer, what is top of mind for you when it comes to the hacker economy and how sophisticated these teams of people are getting?
Yeah, I think there's stacks of this, and I know Corey pretty well, so hello to Corey as well if he's listening. But in this sort of setup, you've got almost stacks of people. So you've got people that are phishing, harvesting information from consumers and leveraging consumer information. Like, for example, Nora, like if you're using the same password across 5 different services, you might use it for your corporate email. You may also be using it for your DoorDash account. And if DoorDash gets breached, now the enterprise has some vulnerability because the same set of credentials and a simple social engineering attack could be able to infiltrate the enterprise. And it goes all the way from there to more sophisticated hackers that are looking for trade secrets, that are looking for information that they're commissioned to go get from enterprises, all the way to nation states that are basically sponsoring some level of sort of infiltration across critical enterprises, etc. So it's a full stack that goes from bottom to top. They're all different players, but the intent is the same, which is to basically commercialize the data and information that they're picking up on the back end. And what this ends up doing is, it's sort of the weakest link thesis, right? Which is wherever there's a weakest link in each of these different ecosystems, it could be a simple password that a user is using across 3 or 4 different things, all the way to something where there are IT systems that are not fully fortified. It's a very difficult problem to get down to zero risk. So really, what I think about a lot is what are all the different ways that you can drive better hygiene across that particular ecosystem, whether it's an enterprise that's being breached by somebody looking for trade secrets, or it's a smaller company that's getting breached by their employees not having good hygiene. Mm-hmm. And so the more and more you can do to converge better digital hygiene inside each of these ecosystems, the better off you are. Now, some have a lot more dollars going behind it when you get to bigger enterprises. But even with that, the crimes are much bigger, and the kind of people that are attacking are even more sophisticated than perhaps something on the consumer side. But it definitely is a difficult problem, and it's something that needs participation through all players, whether it's overt or just something you're just doing to maintain good hygiene online as you use services.
I feel like most people probably don't have great hygiene online when it comes to, especially using, passwords across multiple accounts. Jeffrey, I'm curious, what was your approach to passwords before you discovered Aura? Did you reuse them? Were they weak passwords?
No,
I just want to know.
I got one. I use it for everything.
For everything.
Work, play, everything. Stupid. No longer, by the way. But
and Jeffrey uses Hakuna Matata.
Yeah,
that's his password.
Hakuna Matata is my password. No one would ever guess that.
Better than password 12345. So that's one step up. So I want to broaden out a little bit and just talk about the sort of VC landscape as it stands now. We had Yeager McConnell, who's the CEO of Crunchbase, on recently, and he told us that growth at all costs is dead, and both of you are in the worlds of venture capital investment and also entrepreneurship. So I guess, Jeffrey, starting with you, what are you seeing and what are you looking for when it comes to growth versus profitability when you're assessing companies to include in your portfolio?
Well, what you're looking for is a smart balance, and I think a lot of it depends on, what stage a company is at. I think growth at all costs was never a particularly wise path. And that's not to say there aren't companies that did pretty good, following that path. But, that's literally a generation ago, right? Like that literally is a decade or more of, but, we look for, first and foremost, great entrepreneurs. We look at things that have achieved product market fit, that have achieved, not just, revenue, but have a sustainable model. But we were looking for that 6 months or 12 months or 18 months ago. I don't think that's really changed, markedly for us. I think we were maybe a bit more conservative in, growth at all cost businesses that we have looked at. But, it's not to say there still aren't, phenomenal entrepreneurs and opportunities out there. But, it's obviously the most recent one was Dylan Fields and Figma, and, which we were an investor in, and watched him build that business, in a really, really smart way. And, where he's got phenomenal growth, but he's got a, very smart and profitable business model that he's pursuing. So it's finding that balance between the two. And there are more of those out there to be found. And there are more Dylan Fields, working every day, and you just, you gotta be on the lookout for the right people and the right signals.
Yeah, the right balance. And Hari, you started Jump Ventures in 2017, so focused on creating, acquiring, funding, and launching innovative businesses. What's your take on the growth versus profitability story?
And I think this has been very cyclic. I've been doing this now for almost 25 years, maybe a little bit more, 26 years now. And there's when capital is cheap, growth at all costs makes a resurgence, and it's kind of done that 4, 5, 6 times in the last 25 years. And so a lot of it is just the cost of capital. And I think what ends up happening is, depending on how much surplus capital there is in the system, and we've had a lot of that in the last 2 or 3 years, what you find is people move away from creating value in companies to chasing valuation. And fundamentally, I've always believed that valuations oscillate around value creation in the company, and value creation comes from building great products, building great moats in your business, building great culture, building great revenue models with great unit economics, etc. And so I think in the last few years, what's happened is the amount of surplus capital, people have a little bit forgotten that part of it and looked a lot more to what will drive the valuation up. And every time there's a divergence that way, there's always a correction sort of on the back end, which is what we're seeing now. So I think in a way it's a good thing, because what it ends up doing is culling the weed a little bit. That makes it sort of easier for companies that have been diligent and focused on fundamental value creation in their business, taking care of their customers and building great products, to rise up. And I think that's what we saw after the dot-com bust. We saw that in 07, 08. Even companies like Wayfair, for example, which is a Boston-based company, they came out of the aftermath of a crisis and built a great and phenomenal business that scaled up quite a bit. So I think in the next few years, you'll see who has sort of stuck to the underpinning of good business building, and who has been sort of chasing valuations, and that I feel is what's happening now. So
it's certainly clear that cybersecurity, at least, is going to continue to be lucrative for the foreseeable future. Crunchbase had reported that cybersecurity venture funding surpassed $20 billion in 2021. So, Hari, will the technology for hacker prevention ever catch up to the sophistication of hackers? Will we ever live in a hack-free world, or are there just going to have to be more and more companies that innovate on top of it?
I don't think you'll ever get to a place where you're always safe. It's just too dispersed a problem, and it's too many sort of players in the system, including customers, consumers, enterprises, etc. But I think what is interesting about the most recent trend, and as we're kind of thinking about these products and adding things to our own sort of roster, is the amount of sophistication that we have now with data systems, with learning systems, etc. If you're able to aggregate those, you are able to catch these things a lot more quickly. If you're able to kind of decipher the signals, you might even be able to prevent a lot of them. So I think the gap does feel like it's converging as technology gets better and a lot more people are focused on it. Mm-hmm. We see that a lot for enterprises, because that $20 billion number that you were talking about, a predominant portion of that went to funding enterprise security. On the consumer side, there's still a huge gap. There's just not a lot of VCs that play in the consumer segment. It's sort of a more difficult market to crack for the reason you mentioned earlier, Nora, which is getting awareness and getting customers to really react and engage with products a little trickier on the consumer side. So there's still a big gap there, but in general, I do think that we're converging, but my view is that it will forever be a cat and mouse thing, because you get smart, the criminals get smart, and so you're always catching up a little bit. So yeah,
criminals are very smart these days.
They are that for sure.
Okay, I want to get to a little bit of career advice from both of you before we get into our fun segments and some games, and then we'll wrap things up. So, Jeffrey, you had said to Morning Brew earlier this year, at the time that you had sold DreamWorks to NBC Universal, if you were 20 years old at the time, that was 6 years ago when the company was sold, you said you would be in digital technology. That would have been your career choice. Does that still stand true? If you were a 20-year-old today, what industry do you think would be the smartest industry to get into?
I more so today than even then 6 years ago. Today, I think if you have dreams and ambition to build a great product or company, to impact the world, to find fame and fortune, it is in some version of Silicon Valley. 6 years ago, it was Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley is replicating itself in other parts of the world. So there are global places to be able to do that. But digital technology today is where I think the most exciting career opportunities are if you are entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. And whatever I felt 5 or 6 years ago, I feel even more confident that that's where the greatest opportunities are today. When I started out in the 1970s, you went to Hollywood, and that's where you could find fame and fortune, and I did. But I don't feel like that same opportunity exists today, and certainly not to the same degree.
Any career regrets, Jeffrey?
None.
Would you have done it differently?
No,
None?
honestly. I wish I'd gotten fired a little less publicly, a little less ugly, but no, every chapter has given me something great. It's, and I would say the greatest thing for me, Nora, from a career standpoint, including in this moment right now today, I have always been blessed by the fact that what's in front of me has always been so much more interesting and engaging and fulfilling than what's behind me. Mm-hmm. And I know how lucky I am to be able to say that. What I'm doing today, I actually love more than what I was doing yesterday or last year or 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. And I understand, when I say that to you, how significant that is, because I've had great chapters before.
Are you saying cybersecurity is more fun than Hollywood, Jeffrey?
Yeah. Digital technology is right now. Yeah, I'm having as much or more fun at this today than I was, in the golden era of the 80s and 90s in Hollywood. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, good to know. Hari, any career regrets for you? You've been in digital tech the whole time, so anything you would have done differently?
He wanted to go to Hollywood. He's sorry. You
could have been a star, Hari.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. I think I kind of look at it in pockets within my career. I was an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 20. I'm in my mid 40s now, and along the way, some of the things I wish I had known, if I could have owned more equity in the business that I've kind of created over time, which means waiting a little longer to raise capital, being a little bit more diligent about sort of outside and capital raises. That's certainly one thing. And I think it kind of boils down to when you're younger, it's always a little scarier to make a complete and outsized bet on yourself. I have never met a successful entrepreneur that's ever said, "I wish I'd owned less of my own company." Everybody wants to, wants to own more of it. And the reason you take capital is because you don't want to wait. Sometimes some businesses need it, but many a times it's because it helps you manage risk a little better in your own mind anyway. So if I could go back and do it again, I would bet on myself, fully and all the way versus perhaps, partially like I've done a few times in my career. So
amazing. I guess on the topic of regrets, so Jeffrey, when I have to ask about Quibi for like 2 seconds, and I want to talk about it from the the career perspective, because it was this short form streaming platform. It failed due to a bunch of bad circumstances in 2020. For me specifically, if I have a bad meeting or a bad interview or just a small bad thing that I feel is a failure, I'll ruminate on it. I'll lose sleep over it. And I know that's the case for a lot of my peers. How do you bounce back, Jeffrey, especially for something that public? How do you bounce back and decide that you're going to keep building?
Yeah.
What keeps you going in the face of failure?
But I think that's what entrepreneurs do. By the way, so just to give you how different Hollywood and, let's call it Silicon Valley again, the ecosystem, how different they are from one another. In Hollywood, when you make something and it fails, a movie, a TV show, an animated film, a Broadway show, whether you're behind the camera or in front of the camera, and those things don't work, it's not just that they don't work, they are humiliating. In other words, the ecosystem around it, the whole media world around it amplifies that failure, magnifies that failure, and makes you feel that failure in a very public and painful way. It's a very harsh part of Hollywood, and Silicon Valley is actually quite the opposite. They say, you tried, you took a shot, you did something that no one had done before. And there's a very simple equation that I always think of. If you want to do something that is unique and original, that equals risky. If you take risk, that means sometimes you will fail. If you take the right to fail away from yourself or from others, they will not take risk. And if they don't take risk, they won't do unique and original. And look at Hollywood today. Very, very, very small percentage of things are now unique and original. They're all franchises. They're all known IP. They're all derivatives of it. So you have a very different, ecosystem today. Whereas in Silicon Valley, there's that understanding. And even for Quibi, which was a crazy ass moonshot. I mean, think about how audacious that was, how ambitious it was, how pioneering it was, and how risky it was. We all knew it. Our investors knew it. But that didn't stop us from having the enthusiasm and the ambition and the creativity and the drive and the passion to try it. And I will say to you, and I've said this over and again, and I will always say it, the failure of Quibi humbled me. It did not humiliate me. And I'm not sure why that is the case. Maybe it's because I'm so proud of the work that others did, that artists and filmmakers and storytellers who came in and said, oh, we're going to try something completely new. We're going to make these, high-end, high quality content and chapters, and they did it, and it was actually really great. And I was proud of the content that they made. The fact that we didn't have product market fit is and why, I don't blame it on anybody or anything, or people say, well, do you think it was COVID? I don't know. It's certainly part of it, but I can't say that's the only reason that it didn't work. It didn't work. And to me, the thing I'm most proud of in its failure is that when it was clear to us it wasn't working, we gave $600 million back to our investors. Now, we still lost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, but the fact that once it was clear it wasn't going to work, we shut it down as quickly as we could, as efficiently as we could, and gave money back to the people that took a risk on us.
I love that you called Quibi a crazy-ass moonshot, because our next segment is called
Crazy-ass
Shoot Your
Moonshot.
Shot. I think we'd have to rename it. It is called Shoot Your Shot. So starting with Hari, I would love to know, what is your moonshot idea? This is your biggest ambition, your wildest dream. It could be personal or professional.
Yeah, I think for me, professionally, I feel like there's a lot of convergence now that's happening on the technology side, the health side. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs, I meet a lot of folks, and in general, underneath all of it, there is this notion where people still have like a general sense of anxiety, like the level of mental anxiety, the level of sort of physical anxiety, all of that has gone up quite a bit. So one of the concepts that we've been kind of ruminating in the back of mind, I mean, someday, if we ever have an opportunity to build it, is whether you can kind of, converge data, gut health, and genetic information into something that's very personalized, customized, to get people to a level of kind of a baseline happiness where they can kind of, build up from there and have it be very personalized. I think it's very difficult. It's a lot of kind of mixed, pieces that need to come together. But it's something that we've been kind of noodling on for a bit now. And actually, with Jeffrey's partner Sujay, we've been talking about that, off and on. But something like that, where you can, for the masses, customize by using technology to drive a very basic human necessity, which is a sense of happiness and a sense of feeling good about yourself in a scientific way. So that's my idea. Maybe we'll get to it someday. So
I'm in. Jeffrey, quickly, what is your moonshot?
So Hari, he's actually touched on one. Let's call that health wellness as a sort of macro idea. The other one that I feel equally ambitious about is what I would call financial wellness. For the average person today, I think quality of life would be measurably better if there was an enterprise that actually helped them manage the day-to-day finances of their life, and a place where reliably and dependably they could actually get professional advice for decisions. Do I rent a home? Do I buy a home? Do I lease a car? Do I buy a car? Do I retire my student loan? Do I extend? Like, these are macro decisions that people have to make every day that have enormous impact on the quality of their life. And they don't have, I think, I'm lucky enough, I have access to advisors and very smart people who can actually help me have financial wellness. Most people do not. Yeah. And I'd like to see that available to everybody. I think that would be a great thing that would improve society, working people, everybody, I think, would benefit from financial wellness.
Agree. Okay, final thing. It is now time to play This or That Hollywood Tech Edition. So we're combining two of your worlds, Hollywood and technology. So I'm going to list out pairs of cool futuristic technologies that have famously appeared in television and film, and you have to choose which one you wish was real. Very easy. Okay, since we've been on the topic of crime, this or that, crime prediction technology from Minority Report, or being able to download physical and mental skills into your body and brain, like martial arts, via a computer, like in The Matrix. What do you guys wish was actually real?
I mean, I have to go with Minority Report, because we actually describe our company internally that way, which is we're the Minority Report for cybercrime. So so it's an easy one.
Perfect. Dope. Jeffrey, what do you think?
Let me be really clear. Minority Report was made by my partner, Mr. Spielberg. That's a non-choice choice.
I tried to make the first one easy. Okay, great. So we pick Minority Report. Number 2. Now it's time to mess with the space-time continuum.
All right, here comes the Star Trek question.
Yeah, how did you know? Okay, this or that. Time travel from Back to the Future, or, of course, teleportation from Star Trek.
Okay. Well, you do know that the very first movie, as a little puppy executive in the movie business, that I actually shepherded, was the first Star Trek film. So there's my answer for you.
Boom.
I was an MA Trekkie.
Amazing.
I mean,
Beat me up, Scotty.
Yes. Hurry.
Live long and prosper. I got to go with the Trekkies. So
Perfect. So we'd rather be able to travel anywhere instantaneously than be able to go back in time. I agree. Okay, lastly, technology that gives you superpowers. This or that. An Iron Man suit, so you can fly, fight, have a computer interface, and talk to Jarvis all the time. Or an Ant-Man suit, so you can shrink and expand whenever you so please. What do you pick?
RDJ. Gotta go with
that's us. We're Downey boys.
RDJ all the way.
Man all day. You were Downey boys. I mean, you have to pick Robert Downey Jr. Honestly, I love Ant-Man as my favorite Marvel film, so I'm gonna have to disagree on this one and go with the Ant-Man suit. I am probably alone in this.
There is no bad Marvel film, so you can't lose on that.
There you go. Yes, amazing. Okay, well, that was fun. We're going to wrap things up. This was a great conversation. Hari, Jeffrey, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Nora.
Thanks, Nora. Take care.
This is Business Casual, and I'm Nora Ali. You can follow me on Twitter at Nora K. Ali, and I would love to hear from you. If you have ideas for episodes, comments, and thoughts on episodes you loved, fun segment ideas, just shoot me a DM, and I will do my very best to respond. You can also reach the BC team by emailing businesscasual@morningbrew.com or give us a call. That number is 862-295-1135. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Business Casual on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And if you like the show, please, please, please leave us a rating and a review. It really, really helps us. Business Casual is produced by Catherine Millsop and Olivia Mead. Additional production, sound design, and mixing by Daniel Marcus. Kate Brandt is our fact checker, and A.B. Silver is our senior booking producer. Sarah Singer is our VP of Multimedia. Music in this episode from Daniel Marcus and the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Thanks for listening to Business Casual. I'm Nora Ali. Keep it business and keep it casual.
Business Casual.
If you like what you saw and you like what you heard, you can listen to the entire episode of this podcast, Business Casual, anywhere you get your podcasts. And please go ahead and subscribe to the Morning Brew YouTube channel and go ahead and click on that alarm bell, that thing right there, so you can be alerted anytime there's a new video.